Every empire, every great economy has always had someone else paying its bills. Sometimes it's through taxes, sometimes through debt, and sometimes through something far less visible, the quiet transfer of wealth from the poor to the powerful. Today, that transfer still happens, only now it's dressed up in economic language. Inflation, interest rates, austerity, structural adjustment. But the outcome is the same. The poor fund the wealth of nations. Let's start where it began. In the 16th century, when Europe began its global expansion, gold and silver flooded in from the colonies. Spain's ships returned heavy with treasure mined by forced indigenous labor. The profits built palaces and funded wars, yet inflation wiped out local wages back home. The poor in both colonies and Europe lost purchasing power, while the elite converted metal into political power. That was the first great wealth transfer, the one that turned conquest into capital. Fast forward to the Industrial Revolution. Britain's factories roared, but they were fueled by cheap cotton from India, cheap sugar from the Caribbean, and cheap labor from everywhere the empire touched. Wealthy nations industrialized not in isolation, but by extracting value from those who couldn't say no. India, once one of the richest economies in the world, saw its share of global GDP collapse from 23% in 1700 to under 4% by 1950. The profits didn't vanish, they simply moved. By the 20th century, colonialism gave way to a new system, financial imperialism. Instead of soldiers, it used spreadsheets. Instead of forts, it built central banks and debt contracts. When developing nations needed money to industrialize, they borrowed from Western institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, or private creditors. The loans came with conditions: cut subsidies, privatize industries, open your markets. On paper, these were reforms. In practice, they drained national budgets into interest payments. Between 1980 and 2000, poor countries paid over $4 trillion in debt service, several times the amount they originally borrowed. Hospitals went underfunded, schools closed, currencies collapsed. Meanwhile, global investors earned steady returns. The pattern was clear. Capital flowed uphill from the struggling economies to the already wealthy. Even within rich countries, the same pattern holds. Inflation quietly taxes the poor because their wages don't rise as fast as prices, and their savings sit in cash, not assets. The rich, meanwhile, own the assets that benefit from inflation: real estate, stocks, commodities. When central banks print money, it's the wealthy who get it first through rising markets, while the poor pay later through higher living costs. Every recession repeats the story. Governments bail out banks too big to fail, while small businesses vanish. Then, as interest rates rise to control inflation, the burden lands on the bottom through lost jobs, credit tightening, and shrinking welfare. But it's not just economics, it's structure. The global system rewards capital over labor, assets over effort. The poorer nations supply raw materials, cheap manufacturing, and debt repayments. The richer ones collect interest, patents, and rent. It's an elegant loop disguised as globalization. Take the smartphone in your pocket. Its lithium is mined in Bolivia. Its cobalt in the Congo. Its assembly in Vietnam or China. Each step creates wealth. But where does it end up? The profits concentrate in the headquarters, the software patents in California, the shareholders in London or Tokyo. The supply chain looks global, but the money chain flows one way. Even remittances, the money migrant workers send home, fit the pattern.
In 2023, workers from poorer nations sent back over $600 billion to their families. It sounds empowering, but it also props up the global labor system. Rich nations import labor without importing poverty, while the poor nations export labor without exporting wealth. This is how the modern economy sustains itself by channeling the energy, time, and labor of billions into the financial engines of a few. The system doesn't need to steal. It only needs to structure. Every dollar a garment worker earns in Bangladesh buys fewer goods because of global inflation. Every interest payment Ghana makes on its dollar-denominated debt strengthens the currency that keeps it dependent. Every stimulus package in Washington raises the cost of living for someone halfway across the world. The cycle continues because it's hidden in plain sight. The poor don't write the rules of trade or debt or currency. They live under them. And until those rules change, their sacrifices will keep underwriting the wealth of nations. But history teaches one thing: such systems don't last forever. The gold empires fell. The colonial ones collapsed. Even financial dominance fades when imbalance becomes unbearable. The question isn't whether the world will change, it's who will write the next equation. Will wealth finally flow outward, building rather than draining? Or will another system rise, built once again on the backs of those who can least afford it? For now, one truth remains. The modern world runs on an ancient formula. The poor fund the powerful. The many sustain the few. And every empire, in time, must face the cost of that equation.